Turbulence in one of the largest school districts in the state. The Duval superintendent faces scrutiny and pressure from the controversy at this local school for the arts. Board chairwoman Dr. Kelly Coker joins us to discuss the issue. There's new information in the Jacksonville City Council investigation of a former candidate for mayor. Councilman Nick Howland explains the response from both the General Counsel and the Ethics Commission. Plus, city, state, and now national politics to discuss. Political analyst Rick Mullaney on the president's plan to run again and the former president who may be waiting for a rematch on This Week in Jacksonville. Glad you are with us today. So a week of surprises and some strong statements in Duval County. The school district has been trying to weather the storm of a scandal at a magnet school and some sharp criticism for the state's education commissioner. So joining us right now, Dr. Kelly Coker, chairwoman of the Duval County School Boards. A board had called a meeting Friday, and as I read, to address what I call system failures at Douglas Anderson School for the Arts. And then half an hour before the scheduled time, that meeting was canceled. Maybe explain some of that, and then we'll dive into this issue that has a lot of people talking about what's going on.
Absolutely, and we certainly appreciate the public and all of their input in our work with the students in Duval. There is a simple reality. There are a lot of legal matters surrounding what we are doing in regards to Douglas Anderson and in regards to decisions that we may make as a board. And quite honestly, the Office of General Counsel called me and requested that as the board chair that we go ahead and cancel today's meeting in light of some current legal matter. We will be having this meeting again in the future. We're just postponing it for the time being.
There was a meeting earlier in the week on Wednesday.
Absolutely.
Where is the school board right now in terms of trying to get through this problem? And there's some different layers that go along with. There's at least one arrest here at Douglas Anderson for a teacher, but some other teachers that have been out of classrooms, and then these 50-some cases that the state's education commissioner wants to talk about. But just tackle that first part. What was this week's meeting, and how are you trying to address this problem?
Sure. So the meeting we held on Wednesday, we did not, and it was a special board meeting. We didn't want to do it as a part of a normal workshop or a Tuesday evening meeting that we have at the beginning of the month. It was pressing enough to call for an emergency board meeting. And we had that, and it was to hire a third-party investigator to come in and help us to understand what's happened at DA. There is a simple reality that when we look at the file on the arrest of Jeffrey Clayton, the teacher who was arrested, that there are multiple incidents over a period of years. And as a board, we need to understand, how did that happen? How did someone that had those incidents were they allowed to stay in the classroom for as many years as they did? And so we wanted to start that investigation. When we scheduled the meeting, we had that in mind, but there was also a reality that we did receive a letter from the Florida Department of Education saying that, by the way, earlier this week, we received 50 additional teacher investigative files. Some of them dated back to 2020, 3 school years, and we want to bring that to your attention, and we are deeply concerned with that as well. So when we hired the third-party investigative firm on Wednesday, we went ahead and increased the scope of that work to include also why a 3-year delay in sending cases over to the Florida Department of Education when state law says that if a teacher's arrested, you report it in 24 hours, and if it's a normal incident, it must be reported within 30 days. And we're out of compliance, and we've got to understand why.
So you served as an assistant superintendent in the district. Where do you stand on the superintendent, Dr. Green's future in Duval County? That has come up certainly in this last week or so, if her job is in jeopardy, and I would suppose that would be something that the board is talking about.
So certainly, having been an assistant superintendent in the district, what I can say is that we have had multiple superintendents who have brought gifts and talents to the table, but each of them have had other moments as well. I think right now that our board we're taking all the information in, we're trying to dive into it, we're trying to digest it, and then we're going to determine from there what are our next steps as it relates to multiple levels of personnel. There's got to be some accountability as it relates to what has happened. Our children deserve that, our parents deserve that, and quite candidly, the community at large deserves that. And so I don't want to speculate one way or the other. What I can tell the community is we are working through the facts, and we are going to make decisions and hold people accountable as needed.
Wednesday, we learned that Reginald Johnson has been reassigned. So as I read this, Johnson was a supervisor of professional standards. Is this part of some accountability, or why was that move made?
First off, that move was necessary. He was the front line of the people that actually have to send those 50 reports over to the Florida Department of Education. Removing him from office is simply a matter so that we can begin that investigation to determine why weren't they sent. He had been in that position for a while, and again, removal just it makes sense in this moment. Accountability makes sense, and again, we do the investigation and determine whether we need to ultimately part ways with that employee.
So as I look at this, and you brought it up, but the Commissioner of Education sent this letter to the school board, to Dr. Green, the superintendent, and really was kind of a shocker there. Dr. Green said it was shocking and upsetting to her as well. Is that pervasive? Is everybody who got that letter said, hey, this can't happen?
Oh my goodness, let me say this, as a longtime educator, no, that can't happen. We have got to safeguard our children. We've got to ensure their safety and well-being. And when you have cases that are 3 years old that haven't been sent over, and it's important for the public to know, the only people that can take action against a teacher's certificate is the Florida Department of Education. That's why it's so important they get over there. It's not just checkbox compliance. It's so that they can be reviewed and we can determine whether licensure should be at stake on someone. And so certainly we were all upset by that. I don't know anyone who wouldn't be. And again, definitive action has to be taken so that that does not ever happen again, and that there are protocols in place and checks and balances in place so that we don't get in this situation ever again. Again, children deserve better.
And your career as an educator and then administrator and now serving on the school board as the chairwoman, are there stops along the way where you would hear something about another educator that would be concerning, and what's the protocol? What should a teacher or administrator do if I hear, hey, maybe that instructor isn't handling him or herself the right way?
Gosh, I really appreciate this question because there's been a lot of, wait, how does it all get reported? So as a principal, assistant principal, if a teacher or a colleague of someone, if a student, if a parent, if a community member comes to you and says, hey, by the way, I think this happened with this teacher, what you have to do at that point, first off, as a teacher with a certificate in the state of Florida, you're what's called a mandatory reporter. You have to call the Department of Children and Families if you feel there's any type of mental bodily harm that's been done to that child. So that's item number one, and that's a non-negotiable. And if you don't do that, that's actually possibly going to go against your licensure. So that's item number one. The second item that happens is that principal or assistant principal then calls the district office, particularly professional standards. And professional standards is the office that comes in, investigates those claims. And honestly, a lot of people think principals render discipline and whatnot. They don't. The professional standards office reviews all the claims and determines whether it'll be a verbal warning, a written warning, termination without pay, removal from the classroom for further investigation. That's all done through that professional standards office. So the principal is kind of the middle person. They're in charge of reporting, but ultimately the professional standards office guides you through that process.
Dr. Coker, we're out of time here, but as we move forward, is this all going to a place of a legal battle? Is this something that the board is going to be able to handle? Where do you see this going?
What I will tell you is I work with 6 other members of this board, and I can tell you that every single one of them is deeply committed to the safety and well-being of our children. And I will tell you, you are going to see us continue to take action until we get to the bottom of it. As for other legal battles, Office of General Counsel is always there to support and assist, and we're grateful to them. But bottom line is, as a board, we are going to continue to move forward and protect our children.
Yeah, we had to work pretty hard to make sure we got to talk to you today, but thank you for making the time. Obviously, a lot of people very concerned with what's going on. Appreciate your insights today,
No,
Dr.
thank you for your time. I'm grateful.
All right, thank you. So stay with us. City Councilman Nick Howland pushed for an investigation of Leanna Cumber in the middle of Cumber's campaign for mayor. Councilman Howland with us today. He's going to explain why and then provide his opinion on what's happening with city schools and the concerns there for parents all over Duval County. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville with Kent Justice.
And new this week, Jacksonville's General Counsel responded to a request by City Councilman Nick Howland to look at the decision made by the city's Ethics Commission not to pursue an investigation into former candidate for mayor Leanna Cumber. All right, the General Counsel issued a statement saying that the matter could be taken up again. And as News4Jax had reported, a special City Council committee was investigating whether Cumber properly disclosed her husband's involvement with a possible sale of JEA a few years ago. That committee turned over over the issue to the city's Ethics Commission. The Ethics Commission decided the complaint by City Council wasn't filed correctly and that it was outside the statute of limitations. This week, the General Counsel issued a statement saying that the council acted on incorrect advice and the statute of limitations did not apply in this case and that it was not a political hit job. It's now up to the City Council to ask the Ethics Commission to reconsider that investigation into Council Member Cumber. So joining us right now, Councilman Howland. So I've got these letters from City Hall. And first off, why was the mission of the Special Investigative Committee in terms of this investigation, why was that important to you?
Well, first, Ken, thanks for having me. It was important to me because I learned, just like everybody else on January 27th, from the media that there were credible allegations that we had a council member who potentially filed a false or misleading disclosure regarding her husband's involvement with one of the bidding partners for JEA. And when you have an elected official potentially submitting a false or a misleading disclosure to the city council, or thereby the people of Jacksonville, it's worth investigating. It's kind of like there's smoke there. Let's find out if there's fire. And I was one of two that asked the council president to consider opening up another special investigatory commission or committee to see if there is indeed fire there.
So broadly perceived as a weaponizing of government because it accuses one of your colleagues of wrongdoing. And by the way, she's in the race for mayor. Speak to that, and I know that General Counsel spoke to that issue as well.
Well, I think the right thing to do is to investigate whether there was a false or misleading disclosure. I think the political thing to do would have been to bury it just because the individual is a current candidate for mayor, or at that point was a current candidate for mayor. So actually we addressed that when the Special Investigatory Committee met for the first time. We did not want to get into the business of investigating our colleagues. So what we wanted to look for is there fire there? We've seen the smoke. Is there fire? So we actually asked Councilwoman Cumber if she'd consider coming before the SIC, the Special Investigatory Committee, to talk about why she filed the disclosure that way. And we also asked members of the public if they had any more information about her husband's involvement with one of the bidding partners for JEA. We got droves of information. We got a lot of, I want to say 133 pages of information. And at that point, the Special Investigatory Committee decided, all right, it merits an independent investigation. Let's turn it over to the Ethics Commission. We did that in early March.
It came to our attention in our newsroom through someone who is connected to a opponent of Cumber's campaign, the campaign of an opponent of Leanna Cumber. So that's why I think a lot of people say, hey, is this coming out just because there's a campaign for mayor? Is that something that y'all considered when you said, should we or shouldn't we? It sounded like that is something you thought about, right?
It was something we thought about for sure, and it's addressed in the minutes of the Special Investigatory Committee. And that's one of the reasons we decided to turn it over to the Ethics Commission when we determined that there appears to be fire. And again, the right thing to do is to investigate this. The political thing to do, have been accused of this being a political hit job. The political thing to do would have been to bury it, just because there was a candidate
sweeping
running
under the rug.
Yeah, exactly. You can't do that. The right thing to do is to investigate.
Let me ask about this. You just heard we had the school board, the chairwoman of the school board. This is a serious thing going on. Where do you, as a council member, fit with this, or where do you land on this? And you're a parent too, so this has got to be very concerning what's going on at that specific school and across the district with these complaints that weren't handed in.
Oh, I'm outraged, devastated, angered. I think Dr. Coker earlier in the show said it best. The #1 job of Duval County Public Schools is child safety. And I do have 2 kids in Duval County Public Schools, so I can only imagine what the children, the students, the parents, the larger DA community is going through right now. But I do applaud the school board for having OGC open an investigation into what's happening at DA and also why we're seeing these underreported incidents. That's potentially indicative of a systemic issue, and I'd like to see them get to the bottom of it.
There's always, we talked to Dr. Coker, there's already somebody, that professional standards person who's already been kind of sidelined and maybe disciplined for what's going on here. What about the superintendent? A lot of people feel like Dr. Green has done a very good job in these 4 or 5 years that she's been here. Is this something that you think would be disqualifying? Because she's the leader and the organization may have failed in this area.
Well, I think that depends on the results of the investigation. It's outside of the scope of a city council person, but it's a decision that the Duval County School Board is going to have to make. And if there are systemic issues that are resulting in underreporting of incidents and therefore child safety is at risk, then potentially there does need to be a change. But that's absolutely up to the Duval County School Board.
Yeah. So I appreciate the time today. I will forecast that we're going to get back together before too long and talk about some really important veterans-related issues.
Absolutely.
So we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Councilman, thank you.
Thank you, Kent.
So political analyst Rick Mullaney is here today as well. He's going to join us as we look at the most recent announcements for Vote 2023 in Jacksonville and Vote 2024 on the national stage. Stay with us on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Well, Vote 2024. This week, President Biden announced that he will run for re-election. We're also tracking a Republican who announced that he is launching his own presidential campaign as well. Asa Hutchinson formally unveiling his campaign this week in Arkansas. During his campaign event, he touched on his plans to address the economy, crime, and border security. Hutchinson was the governor of Arkansas starting in January 2015 through this past January. He's the fifth candidate in the race for the Republican nomination. Former President Donald Trump, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, businessman Vivek Ramaswamy, and TV host Larry Elder. They've all formally launched their campaigns, and it's believed Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was also going to run for the nomination. Three candidates currently in the running for the Democratic nomination. President Joe Biden launching his re-election campaign with a video announcement. He's up against author Marianne Williamson and President John F. Kennedy's nephew, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So Florida's presidential primary election, that's going to be March 19th, 2024. Georgia hasn't set its date yet. Secretary of State gets to choose that. We get to talk about it because this is something that was anticipated. President Biden making his announcement 4 years from the date when he announced his first, run for president a few years ago. All of this is kind of spinning around before we get to what really happens next year with primaries and everything else.
Well, Kent, if you look at it right now, it appears that we're on track for a rematch. And that means President Biden and, of course, Donald Trump. That is not the rematch that most of the nation wants, and things could change. There's a long way to go. But for right now, the Democratic nomination is Joe Biden's if he wants it, and he announced he's running, so he does. And on the Republican side, a little more challenging, but it appears that it'll be Donald Trump. He's increased his lead over time. Very interesting in the president's video announcement, a 3-minute announcement, in which he really, Kent, didn't talk as much about his presidency as he did broad themes and making it a choice. And he talked about freedom, he talked about abortion, he talked about MAGA Republicans, a choice between himself and the alternative. And so you can clearly see that Joe Biden wants to run against and is running against Donald Trump.
So we see that could be that rematch, but in the next few months, we're still going to see these fields grow, right? Especially on the GOP side.
Certainly on the GOP side. And looming out there, of course, is the announcement from Governor Ron DeSantis. For the last 6 months, he's been laying the groundwork. Some have criticized how it's gone so far in recent months with President Trump expanding his lead. But let me say this, it's early. He hasn't announced yet. We expect that after the legislative session. Remember this, August is the first Republican debate on television. The first primary is in February. But you've seen from Governor DeSantis, from his victory speech in November to his inauguration speech in January, to his book tour, to his visits to early primary states, to his visits around the globe, he's laying the groundwork for a presidential run.
So there will be lots and lots of polls between now and those primaries that we're talking about next February. Early polling shows a potential Donald Trump versus Joe Biden rematch. And those polls say that Americans really don't want to see that. They don't have patience for it.
They do not. For Joe Biden, according to an NBC recent poll just last week, 70% of the country, that's a big number, does not want him to run for president. 51% of those are Democrats in particular. A lot of that is age-related. They're questioning whether he'll be 82 when he takes office if he were to win, 86 at the end of the term. They're questioning whether his age will compromise his ability to serve. Separately, he's got low approval ratings. But despite all that, the political reality is he's very formidable, and against Donald Trump, he believes he can win, and polling suggests he can win.
It's something that we're We have been tracking, but I'm certain that the interest will just go up, especially watching what happens with the Florida governor. Let's talk local politics for just a moment in our last few minutes here. This Wednesday, join us at 8 o'clock. We've got our Vote 2023 Mayoral Candidate Forum, and Democrat Donna Deegan has confirmed Republican Daniel Davis has so far declined, but this is going to be live on TV, online at our webpage, streaming on News4Jax Plus, something that we do in partnership with the JU Public Policy Institute. This is getting to an important time, right? Our election for mayor in Jacksonville just a couple weeks away.
Kent, it's really, really important and consequential. I hope the people of Jacksonville will turn out and vote. The election is 2 weeks from Tuesday. Come July 1, we'll have a new mayor. We'll have 8 new city council members. And there's also extraordinary both challenges and opportunities for the future leadership of Jacksonville. Capital is coming to North Florida, growth is coming to North Florida, and of course the leadership to manage that capital and growth is really important, from a $1 billion potential deal with the Jacksonville Jaguars to investments in infrastructure to downtown to serving those underserved communities. It is going to be a very important race, and we've been in partnership with WJXT since 2015, hosting 13 televised debates since 2015 in local, state, and federal elections. This one promises to be really extraordinary, given the participation of the Florida Times Union and Nate Monroe, WJCT and Melissa Nelson, and of course, Kent, the extraordinary job you always do. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Melissa Ross, by the way.
Melissa
Nelson.
Ross. That's right.
That would be something to have the state attorney involved.
That's right, Melissa Ross.
Rick, thank you so much, and thank you. This Week in Jacksonville airs each Sunday morning at this time. I'm Kent Justice. Thanks for watching on air on Channel 4 in the CW17, and then you'll find us online at news4jax.com or streaming on News4Jax Plus. And if you're only joining us Sundays for This Week in Jacksonville, you're missing out. Be sure to subscribe to my weekly Twidge newsletter. It's a real bonus for News4Jax insiders. Head to news4jax.com/newsletters and sign up under This Week in Jacksonville.
See why every day more people are choosing News4Jax, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.